It was supposed to be a normal landing, just another routine end to a long flight across the Pacific Ocean. The pilots, both highly experienced, have done landings like this hundreds of times before. Their plane, one of the largest cargo jets in the world, was carrying goods safely throughout the night sky. Inside the cockpit, everything felt familiar. The steady hum of the engines, the glow of the instruments, the slow descent toward home. As they approached the airport, the winds were strong, and the night was heavy with clouds, but nothing they haven't faced before. Everything seemed fine. Inside the cockpit, the pilots focused calmly, checking their instruments, trusting their skills, and preparing for a safe touchdown. But then, without warning, a powerful gust of wind hit the plane. In just a few short seconds, things started to slip out of control. A slight misjudgment, a moment of instability, and then disaster. The plane hit the runway hard, broke apart, and slid across the ground in a storm of wreckage. Emergency teams rushed to the scene, but the damage had already been done. It was a tragedy that raised painful questions, not just about what happened that night, but about how quickly even the most experienced crews can be caught off guard. This is the story of FedEx Flight 80, a disaster that shocked the aviation world and left behind lessons that are still saving lives today. FedEx Flight 80 was a scheduled cargo flight traveling from Guangzhou, China to Narita International Airport in Japan. The aircraft was a McDonnell Douglas MD-11, a massive three-engine jet designed to haul heavy cargo across oceans and continents. It wasn't carrying passengers, but it carried something just as important: thousands of pounds of goods moving between two of the world's busiest trading hubs. At the controls were two highly skilled pilots. Captain Kevin Kyle Mosley, 54 years old, was a veteran pilot with over 12,800 hours of flight experience. He was respected by his colleagues for his steady hand and calm presence in the cockpit. First Officer Anthony Stephen Pino, 49 years old, was equally capable with more than 6,300 hours in the air. Both pilots had flown in challenging conditions before. They were used to crosswinds, rain, and long-haul fatigue. As Flight 80 approached Narita, the weather began to worsen. Rain fell lightly over the airport and strong crosswinds swept across the runways. Crosswinds are one of the toughest challenges pilots face. They can push a plane off course, demanding constant corrections and perfect timing. Landing a plane in a crosswind isn't just a skill, it's a battle against the forces of nature. Even a slight mistake during the final seconds can turn a normal landing into a disaster. But from the ground, everything still looked normal. Controllers cleared Flight 80 for final approach, unaware that the plane was heading straight into danger. As the MD-11 descended toward the runway, the wind pushed hard against the massive aircraft. The plane rocked slightly from side to side, but the pilots kept adjusting, fighting to stay on course. Inside the cockpit, their hands moved quickly over the controls, making small, precise corrections. The plane's nose was turned slightly into the wind, a technique known as crabbing, to stay aligned with the runway. The plan was simple. Just moments before touchdown, they would straighten out and land smoothly. But in strong winds, even the simplest plans can become unpredictable. The MD-11 was known in the aviation world for being tricky to land, especially when heavy. Unlike some other aircraft, the MD-11 didn't handle bounced landings very well. If the plane bounced off the runway, recovery could be extremely difficult. Still, Flight 80 continued its descent, engine power carefully reduced, flaps extended, landing gear down. The runway lights grew closer. Every second counted. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was tense but professional. They were seconds from touching down, and unknowingly seconds from disaster. At first, the landing seemed normal. The plane made contact with the runway, but instead of settling smoothly onto its wheels, it bounced. The first impact lifted the heavy cargo plane back into the air just slightly, but enough to set off a chain reaction. In a desperate attempt to correct the bounce, the pilots pushed the nose forward. But it was too soon and too much. The MD-11's nose slammed into the runway hard. The front landing gear collapsed instantly under the force. The massive jet flipped over, breaking apart as it slipped across the wet runway. The cargo hold tore open. Flames and smoke poured into the night sky. Inside the cockpit, Captain Mosley and First Officer Pino never had a chance to escape. The plane came to rest upside down, shattered and burning. In less than 30 seconds, a normal landing had turned into a nightmare. Emergency crews rushed toward the wreckage as fast as they could. Fire trucks sprayed foam across the burning debris. Paramedics stood ready, hoping they could find survivors. But the impact had been too violent. Both pilots were killed instantly during the crash. At the airport terminal, controllers and ground crews watched in horror. FedEx employees and aviation workers around the world soon heard the news. Flight 80 had crashed on landing at Narita. Investigators and safety officials quickly sealed off the runway, treating it like a crime scene. The world wanted answers, and so did the families, friends, and co-workers of the two pilots who had lost their lives. The investigation into Flight 80 began immediately. Teams from Japan's Transport Safety Board and the U.S. NTSB worked side by side to find out what happened. The first mission was recovering the black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder. After hours of careful work in the wreckage, they found them, burned but still intact. Listening to the cockpit recordings was haunting. The pilots had remained calm. There were no alarms, no mayday calls, no signs of panic. Everything had unfolded in silence, with the crew doing their best against an unstoppable chain of events. The flight data showed the plane's bounce and the critical nose-down movement afterward that sealed the plane's fate. But why did the plane react so violently? Why couldn't the pilots recover? Investigators realized they needed to look deeper, not just at the pilots but at the aircraft itself. As they pieced together the evidence, the true causes of the crash became clearer. Bad weather played a huge role. Crosswinds and shifting gusts made the landing far harder than expected. But the MD-11's design was also a hidden danger. The plane was known for its sensitivity during landings, especially when it was heavy. If the main landing gear touched down hard, the plane could bounce. If the pilot reacted the wrong way after a bounce, like pushing the nose down too soon, the plane could become uncontrollable. On Flight 80, the bounce was worse because of the wind, and the nose-down input, though understandable, caused the front landing gear to collapse under the massive weight. It wasn't just pilot error. It was a dangerous combination of weather, aircraft behavior, and split-second decisions under extreme pressure. The crash of FedEx Flight 80 forced the aviation world to change. Pilots who flew the MD-11 were given more detailed training on how to handle bounce landings. They learned new ways to react after a hard touchdown, and sometimes to go around and try the landing again if conditions were too dangerous. Airlines became more cautious about landing during strong crosswinds. Controllers were trained to give pilots more precise wind information before landing. Aircraft designers began rethinking how future planes could be more stable during landings. Even today, the lessons from FedEx Flight 80 live on in flight simulators, classrooms, and training programs around the world. Because of what investigators uncovered, pilots are better prepared. Safety has improved, and while nothing can bring back the lives lost that night, the legacy of Flight 80 has helped make aviation safer for everyone. It's a reminder that in flying, as in life, even the smallest moments can change everything, and every lesson learned is a life potentially saved. The legacy of FedEx Flight 80 is more than just a report or a memory. It's a turning point, a reminder that behind every aircraft are people, families, and lives depending on every decision made in the sky. It reminds us that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, the human element will always matter. The story of Flight 80 is proof that even in tragedy we can find purpose, and sometimes the most powerful way to honor a loss is to make sure it never happens again.